Martin, how are things?
I think they're all right.
Looking forward, he said, segueing, to hearing what you have to say about this Sunday's reading,
right.
and in particular, it's the Transfiguration, Matthew 17, 1 to 9. So take us through your thoughts on this.
So we always have this reading on the last Sunday before Lent. So Ash Wednesday is next Wednesday. So in that sense, it's a sort of preparatory or anticipatory reading. And there's a bit of a sense, which I always feel uncomfortable with, but a bit of a sense you get sometimes that, oh, we've got this reading because it's an earnest of the resurrection. So Jesus' transfiguration is to kind of give us a little taster. And I just don't find that a particularly helpful way of looking at it. I think, well, that's, you know, why do we need the taste? You know, we let Easter be Easter, and let's attend to this for what it is, in the context of, for example, the disciples coming to terms with the predictions of the Passion. And I think if we keep it in the frame of the predictions of the Passion, then we might be able to access it at this point as we begin walk into Lent in a more helpful way. And in Matthew's Gospel, in his account, so the Matthew, Mark and Luke all have accounts, versions of this, with various variations, additions and lengthenings. The particular lengthening in Matthew is the cloud, excuse me, the cloud comes over them, the voice from heaven says, "This is my son, my beloved." And what Matthew then tells us, which the other two don't have, is that the disciples fell down on their faces in fear. And then Jesus walks over to them, comes over to them, we're told, and says, "Do not be afraid and rise up," or "Rise up and do not be afraid." Now, one of the things that we've already seen about Matthew's Gospel is Matthew is much more positive about the disciples. And one of the reasons he's much more positive about the disciples is he wants, this is my understanding, he wants the people who are reading his Gospel, so his own congregation and us subsequently, to be able to place ourselves in the place of the disciples. And to learn and grow as he portrays the disciples learning and growing. And so what I get here is this, there are a couple of things going on. First of all, there is something extraordinarily important and important for any of us about, you know, those rare, but you know, some would testify to very specific, tangible experiences of the divine. I mean, moments of transfiguration, moments of extraordinary intensity, taken out of yourself, not knowing what you're saying. So all of Peter saying, "Oh, what do we do now? Oh, well, let's build some booths." You know, all of that. But of course, what Peter's doing is trying to hold on to the moment. Let's stay here. And what we get in that little scene with the disciples is that they can't stay there. Jesus, we're told, is alone when he says to them, "Rise up and do not be afraid." That whole visionary, intense experience has gone. It had its moment. It had its impact. It did the transforming effect that it was given them for. And then what you've got is what feels to me like, you know, this is what Lent is about. We are afraid. We are down with our faces on the ground, and Jesus comes to us and says, "Rise up and do not be afraid." And so that's where this becomes a preparation for Lent, not for me, not as an anticipation, a kind of little glimpse of the resurrection, but as the recognition of who Jesus is, which is the voice from heaven in the cloud, that recognition, that declaration, and our response of fear and bewilderment and confusion, and who are we in this? And Jesus coming to us through Lent and saying, rise up and do not be afraid. And Matthew, I think, expects us to use the text in that way, that sort of allegorical interpretation, placing ourselves in the text and say, how is this, what is this for us? Who are we in this? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, yeah. So just to riff, I suppose, a little bit off some of that. So there's that bit in the Transfiguration about building booths, isn't there? And Peter saying, oh, let's build 3 booths, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for yourself, Lord. And taking your point about how Matthew is writing this as if we're to put ourselves in the shoes of the disciples, part of the message it seems here is, no, Peter. You know, you're confusing the messengers with the message. So the messengers were Moses with the law, Elijah with being the mouthpiece of the divine. But here what you've got is the actual message himself, the Son, which is why presumably we have the voice of the Father from heaven saying, this is my Son, my beloved, listen to him. Listen to him. In other words, don't listen to the law through Moses or the prophecy through the prophet. Listen to him. How do we listen to him? Well, I suppose, through word and sacrament. It's he who does my words will be my disciple, and they will know the truth, and the truth will make them free, says in John's Gospel. And also through the sacraments of baptism and the Eucharist, what Augustine called visual words, as it were. How else? Through the book of creation, through our own experiences of God crossing our path, through general providence, and so on. So these are some of the ways in which we actually listen and respond. But there's something about, as you say, the nature of this light and this transfiguring presence, which is there and then is gone. Part of me wants to ask, can we stay with that presence? Why can't we stay with that presence? Or why can't we stay with that awareness of the transfigured glory of the Lord? And I'm led to, and I've not seen this particularly a connection made with it, but I'm led to 1 Corinthians 2, where Paul talks about, how we know the things of God because we have the things of a human being because we have a human spirit within us. So too, we know the things of God through the Spirit of God. So I'm wondering if part of the reason why we're getting the Transfiguration further along in the disciples' journey is they're beginning to get the things of God and to live a little bit more out of the Spirit of God. So they're actually open to recognizing something of the nature of God at this stage, even though this is before their inevitable betrayals and denials and fleeing. And is it true in the same way that as we avail ourselves of the way of Jesus Christ, we become more inclined to see the things of God, whether that's the glorious religious experience or the much more mundane realities of God's presence and activity in our lives? And what I'm not saying here is what somebody like Karl Rahner says, which is this kind of gradualism that gradually, and he kind of like puts together, it seems to me, the resurrection, the ascension, and the parousia, and we gradually become aware of this presence all the time. I'm much more with Tolkien, who said, if we're truly Catholic Christians, then we have a sense that history is one long failure with glimpses of the final victory on the way. And I wonder if that's partly why we have the Transfiguration just before Lent, because what we're about to see is a very difficult time, an arduous time through Lent. But here is a glimpse of the divine light, even so, and we do get glimpses on the way.
And I think the Jesus' words at the end saying, "Don't tell anyone about this." Is thinking along your lines, is him saying, there is a time for this sort of experience in your life, And if you go around telling everybody about it, then that it's not their experience, that's you relating your experience to them, and that's not going to enable them to have that same encounter. It's a bit like, as you say, confusing the messenger with the message. It will be thinking, oh, that was a great experience that you had.
And saints like Teresa of Avila really downplay it, don't they? Those kind of experiences, because they say that is not the main event. The main event is the walking with and the actual union with that can enable those occasional experiences. But we're here about communion with God, not about an experience of our communion with God.
Yeah, absolutely.